Life is good. It's good to be back.
See ya.
All right, everyone. Quote our attorney, Mr. Mullen, it is good to be back. So welcome. Today is Tuesday, April 22nd. We're going to open our work session. We have a number of important topics today. First, we'll start with Board Policy 4318, student use of personal wireless communication devices. Then we have an update on migration to Oracle Release 12.2 and twice per month pay. And we'll conclude with our budget work session on the proposed 2025-2026 operating budget.
Okay.
So for our first topic, the Board Policy 4318, our continued discussions, welcome Dr. Clinton Robinson, Mr. Drew Cook, Dr. Julie Crane, and Michael Martin. Is Mr. Martin here from RTI today?
No, he won't be.
All right, so we'll just, we'll leave it in the capable hands of those three, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Crane, and Mr. Cook.
Welcome, everyone. We say we have a singular outcome on this slide, but truly this is a four-part conversation, and we have less than 30 minutes and counting down allotted to get through this. So we will need to move with intention through this section. These are four topics that generated much discussion at the March Policy Committee meeting, and they represent areas where decisions are needed for further governance guidance as we revise the draft to bring back at next week's Policy Committee meeting. You see these four items that we're bringing today discuss what are emergency situations, how we will handle or manage confiscation, also liability, and device status when it's put away. We've provided you with a physical copy that was included in the backup of the options language you'll see in the coming slides. This document includes the original language as initially proposed in the draft policy that we saw in March. As a result of our conversation today, we will bring you revised draft policy language at next week's Policy Committee meeting on April 29th, 1 to 3. This very same thing.
All right, thank you, Dr. Crane.
There are no questions. We'll go ahead and dive in.
Any questions from the board? All right, please proceed.
Great. So the first topic we want to address is, what do we mean by emergency situation? If we look at the Senate's proposed bill for cell phones, they mention for use in the event of emergency. And the draft policy that we gave you, which was built on a school board association model policy, also uses the in the event of an emergency language. But that's pretty broad and can be subjective. So our initial plan was to bring you two options. The first is to define an emergency as imminent physical danger. So you will see where we have added in blue, as we typically do for policy, that an emergency is a situation involving imminent physical danger that requires immediate communication. We could also go with option B, which empowers staff to determine the need. In that option, school staff may, in their discretion, authorize brief use of a wireless communication device if there is a reasonable and legitimate need to communicate with someone outside the school during the instructional day. Students must ask for permission in advance and must honor any specific directions from staff regarding the duration or specific time of day for any such authorized use.
And so, Dr. Crane, I know there are a couple of these decision points that we need to make. Would you prefer we go through each one individually and talk about it before moving to the next one?
My thought was we would spend 4 or 5 minutes per. We could have some discussion. You can tell me which way you're leaning, and then we will use that to inform. If you prefer that we go through all the options first and then come back, we can do that.
No, my thought was maybe let's talk about each one in isolation. It might be a little more efficient, and then that way we can manage our time better. Ms. Mahaffey?
I like the flexibility that option B has. I think then asking staff to have an R&P related to what that may look like or what that could be, or for different schools, because I think, like, yes, there's an emergency and we think of, if there's for example, a lockdown, or if school is closed for some reason and kids have to go home early. But we know that there are some kids that may not have a health plan or an IEP, but maybe need a conversation with a parent, or I think being flexible for me allows that to happen and to meet individual student needs that may not fit within a 504 or an IEP.
Thank you. And I agree with that. I think, the task we had, defining emergency so we couldn't have debate or discussion or conflict over what is an emergency, gives us two paths. One is for us to define it, or the other to give staff the authority to define it. But that still then puts it in the authority of staff to resolve it. And so let's say it's not a situation involving danger to the student, but maybe it's a family member who's in immediate sickness or peril. We could come up with a lot of excusable situations. Mr. Hershey, what do you think?
Well, I have, of course, cross-referenced Fairfax County Public Schools as I did initially, and they use language unless there's a medical necessity or emergency. Do we have medical necessity anywhere in this?
No.
I wouldn't, because physical, or I wouldn't use imminent physical danger. I think it's very narrow, but
They use medical necessity or emergency.
yes.
All right. Vice Chair Swanson.
Yes, no, that's it.
So I think I just want a little clarity around the school staff. And the reason why I raised that is because, if it's to keep distraction out of the classroom, we don't want teachers having to take away from teaching and learning to, I just feel like it's a little, I just want to see that fleshed out a little bit more, but I am in favor towards option B. But I think a lot of this is, again, we changed this, we've said this many times, it's about changing human behaviors. And so although we have a policy, it's up to parents to buy in and to honor that policy as well.
So, Vice Chair Swanson, if I can follow up with a question to you. Where we talk about like consistency from classroom to classroom versus flexibility, would you see this as a decision that maybe an administrator should make, and it might vary from grade level to grade level or school to school?
Right, well, I'm only looking at it from the high school. I mean, that's where I would really see a lot of that, discretion being needed. But I also do think, to that point, Chair Haggerty, that if I'm teaching and I'm giving that honoring those requests, and Ms. Mahaffey is the other teacher that may not be as strict, so I want to make sure there is still some consistency, and you're not seeing that one teacher's doing one thing and another teacher is not. So if the policy is going to be there, let's make sure that it's consistent, not just from all 198 schools, but all of our teachers as well, and administrators.
I support that as well. Ms. Cord?
Yeah, I like Ms. Mahaffey said, I do support the second option, option B, because it does allow for a lot of flexibility, and it specifically names school staff and students at the center of the decision making. I would like to see some guidelines or examples around reasonable and legitimate need. Like, what are reasonable and legitimate needs? And even if they are not guidelines, examples.
That could be something perhaps that they could develop in rules and procedures. It could be part of a student handbook or communication with parents, so at the beginning of the year, everyone has consistent expectation about, or information about those expectations.
So the discussion that I've heard thus far is that most folks favor option B, but there are some questions still around consistency, so that if you leave your uniform at home and your away game leaves at 2, and you have a parent or an older sibling there, one teacher says, guess you're not going to the away game then, and another teacher says, well, of course you can. Call your brother. We want consistency. And what is reasonable and legitimate need there? Does the missing uniform at home qualify as legitimate and reasonable need or not? So that's what I heard here. So I will take those notes. And if there's nothing further, we'll move on to the next.
Is there anything further, Ms. Mahaffey?
Yeah, I like, and this is my middle school hat, right? Like that teacher to teacher then you know who to go to. So whether it's an administrator approving it or even a school counselor, if there's a need to call because someone's not answering the school phone because they don't know the number. But yeah, maybe a school administrator or counselor, and then taking that burden off of the classroom teacher.
Dr. Crane, is that
That's
feedback?
good. This is language that is very similar to what Winston-Salem Forsyth uses.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, unless there's further comment, we'll move to the next decision point.
The next decision point is about confiscation. And we've given you two options. The first, the existing language that we provided for you just mentioned that confiscation was possible, but we didn't spell out how to do that. So here, we've given you option A, and we didn't have quite enough room on the slide to get all of option A there. It was provided to us by Neil Ramey, our attorney, who works with us on our policy, many of our policy issues, that gives sort of three rules, or three, sorry, I was listening to the report this morning, three tests for whether or not you would confiscate, and then in general, a confiscated device should be returned at the end of the class. However, it could be held until the end of the day, and if there's a pattern, and with notification, it could be held for a parent or guardian to pick it up instead of returned back to the student. Option B is a site-based decision. So each school administration shall specify a written and consistently implemented rule regarding the temporary confiscation of student devices. The rule shall address repeated offenses and specify whether and when a device may be held for pickup by the parent or guardian. As you might imagine, there are lots of different takes on this and varying policy language out there across the state and across the nation. Some are very, very explicit and specific, and some are more general.
All right. Sorry, we have a couple members who are watching remotely, and we're getting some feedback
Sure.
from them. Board members, between the two options, A and B, what are your thoughts? So this time we'll start with Mr. Hershey, then we'll come around.
I prefer A. I don't want to add work to each school, individual school, and we are a school district, not a district of individual schools. And I know there's some stuff that philosophy may not apply to, but I'd like to just see consistent rules and, for lack of a better word, of punishment or discipline from because the schools are going to know when they're different immediately. And I think that makes it harder on staff to enforce.
Thank you. Ms. Mahaffey?
I also prefer option A because I think then it is a district policy, and this is where, your teachers or administrators can say this is the district policy. And sometimes the district in that situation has to be the bad guy. I do want to highlight one of the teachers in my district, if there is a phone going off in her class and it is not silent or it is out when it shouldn't be, she will hand that student a lunch bag, a brown paper lunch bag from way back when, have the student put it in the lunch bag and seal it with a staple and put it on their desk so that she is not liable for that breaking. I know that involves the purchase of lunch bags and staples. But I thought that was also a great idea, especially because we are talking about expensive devices, and I know the next part is liability, but just as a way for, the point can be made without the student losing possession of the device.
Okay. Thank you. Coming around, Ms. Court, do you have any comment?
I am leaning more toward A. However, I do want to say about option B of it being a site-based, I don't want it to go lost upon us that there are many schools who already have policies in place that are working very well. I know I can speak for one of my schools, North Garner has a great policy that they have in place. Though I'm leaning more towards A, I do want I do want to highlight that there are schools that have really great guidelines already in place. In that sense, I do support the second.
Vice Chair Swanson, any thoughts?
I mean, I agree with both option A and option B, but I keep reminding myself it's the policies to be consistent throughout all schools. I'm more inclined to go with option A. Because again, we eliminate the piece of some schools doing things differently. But I also know it's also up to whatever they do on Jones Street may tie our hands even more, and we may have to switch up, tighten our language a little bit more. But I do think A is one of those pieces. But I would also like to know if a student has, let's say that I'm the student, I've had my phone out, I'm doing something, taking a brain break or whatnot. I don't want students to be overly penalized for these pieces, because again, our role is to keep kids in school so teaching and learning can happen, but I also understand that there has to be some form of consequences. But again, I don't think those consequences should be too severe at the same time.
Just a reminder, these confiscation parameters are outside of discipline. Right, we still have our discipline policy in 4309. That is still in place about infractions regarding electronic devices. This is sort of in addition to that, and maybe before we get to that, you've got repeated, so.
Right, I can just see some teachers using this as a way of, let's expedite the process, let's get little Johnny out of here, and so I'm just going to do. So that's the piece that gives me a little pause and concern about this. And so again, I think it's going to take a lot of training, not just for students, but for teachers as well. And I like the example that Ms. Mahaffey provided with the confiscation piece, because again, when I taught, I rarely took cell phones because again, I didn't want to be liable if your phone was already broke and Mr. Swanson has your phone, now I'm liable for it. So I think the confiscation piece, I think we may need to flesh out a little bit more with some great R&Ps so teachers can understand what they're asked to do.
I think that's a very good point, because what we're looking at is removal of the phone, removal of the distraction. There might be other ways to accomplish that. And so the ability to have some flexibility, like you had given your example, a way to be open to that should be preserved if we can.
And it takes away, because it's still there, it takes away the anxiety or the amplification of an issue if a student is worried that something may be happening at home, or losing that device or having to have a confrontation in order to get it back. That can escalate a situation, whereas if it's there, they see it, which is why I think it's, again, I know we're talking about budget later, and brown bags have a cost, but
still, this will flow directly into the next topic.
yeah.
But is there any last points on confiscation?
It's not really a comment, just something to also keep in mind. We also know so many students may have a cell phone, but it may not work. A lot of our students are able to communicate because of the Wi-Fi, so that may be an opportunity for students who are trying to get connected as well. So I do think there's a lot of parameters. And again, I think this is a policy that's going to need a lot of massaging. Once it's repassed, I'm sure we're going to come back and do updates because it's new, but I also don't want to, I just don't want that piece to be overlooked as well.
And, let's be clear. The state government, the North Carolina House and Senate, are both rapidly working on enacting law that will require us to have a restrictive policy. And so what we're trying to do is come up with the best possible policy given the parameters we've seen. And so we may not have it perfect, but to build in that flexibility, but also have consistency where we need it, will be the best policy I think we can put forward. So let's talk about the total.
Yeah, I'll just add that this is about expectations for teachers, as you talked about. And so that'll always be up to the administration to make sure that we're not doing those kinds of things to put students in a position where we're jumping on top of them. I also like the option A that you all can see, because to me it does set up the guidelines for a school. so that everybody can be operating within the same lanes. And there'll still be things that they can do from a site-based decision, but they have the lanes in which to operate, and I think that'll be good.
So if we're ready, let's talk about liability. And I'll let Dr. Crane talk about the two options, although I have a question before we get too far in the discussion. I'll ask after you present them.
Sure. So our current language is option A, that we're not liable. And option, we're not liable for theft, loss, or damage of such devices that the devices are, students are personally and solely responsible for the security of those devices. Option B starts with that very same language, but adds on the end, the school system is not responsible for the theft, loss, or damage of such devices unless they are lost or damaged while confiscated. There are some districts who have said, we're not responsible even if something happens while it's confiscated, right? And I will do Neil proud to remind that the word liable here is actionable liability, so there is negligence for which we would be actually responsible for. Action could be taken against us for that negligence.
And that was sort of where my question, I wanted to go before we got too deep into the discussion. You know, we can't necessarily overturn civil law just by a policy. Right? We can have a policy that uses language about students assume risk to the phone by bringing a phone or electronic device to school and putting out some of those elements, for determining liability into the policy, like assumption of risk. But I think we would have to go with option B. I don't know that we can waive liability as broadly as A does. I'll defer to counsel on that and to Dr. Crane, your research on it, but that's one that kind of troubled me when I looked at the slides.
I'd like to talk to Neil about option B. I'm not really sure I guess the school system, honestly, what's happening here from what I can tell is the school system would be accepting liability in a situation in which they otherwise probably would not be liable through the policy. In B.
Okay.
Right, because they think we'd otherwise have immunity against liability if something were to happen, and this may be opening the door to accept liability for which we might not otherwise have. But I'd be happy to talk to Neil about option B if this is the direction that the board is leaning.
So help me out with that, because the option that would be shielded from liability, is that a sovereign immunity thing? Because wouldn't that be waived by our purchase of insurance?
Well, yeah, if you had insurance to cover.
Yeah, and we generally do. Not for,
You may not. I don't know whether you would have insurance for these actions. I guess you might. But yeah, I'll talk to Neil just to make sure I understand what it is.
It just might be, we can still discuss it, but we might need more legal advice on it before making a final decision. Any other thoughts on it? But definitely we want to protect staff from any liability that could accrue to them for following a policy and doing as directed by the district. Ms. Mahaffey?
Is this coming likely to our next board meeting for first reading?
This will be brought to next week's policy committee meeting.
Oh, okay, so we'll have an answer by then. Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk to Neil.
Okay, thank you.
I'll bring the revised language.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Kay. All right.
And the last item is a consideration that we wrote both options in. We just kind of left them with slashes, forward slashes in the policy language. Option A and option B. Option A is off and put away, and option B is silent and put away. I thought it might be helpful just to throw out some considerations for each position. For off and put away, location services are off if your phone is off. You can't do the Find My or see anybody on Life 360 or something like that. The phone is off. Silent and put away, however, I learned from Allison Reed, who's in the room now, that the correct phrase after policy committee is dependent devices, headphones, smartwatches, et cetera, anything that is wirelessly connected to your phone. Those are called dependent devices, can be connected and active while your phone is on silent. So headphones, earbuds, smartwatches, smart glasses, Bluetooth file sharing like AirDrop and AndDrop, which is the Android corollary, I understand, and notifications with the buzzing and the vibrating. I know it's been an adjustment getting used to my Apple Watch, which does that, and I had no idea how much it happened. So those are considerations for silent and put away. I will tell you that of the two pieces of legislation that are in consideration, the Senate bill says that the wireless device is turned off during instructional time at a minimum, unless through exceptions. But the House bill does not address it. And I understand the Senate, both have made crossover, both have been passed on first reading in each chamber, and the Senate's policy is in their budget, which was released last week.
So just, Dr. Crane, if you want to explain that last one a little more, I'm happy to, about the significance of it being in the budget.
I'm not aware of the significance of it being in the budget, but I know that it's in the budget.
Oftentimes with legislation, if there are items in controversy, sometimes one chamber or the other will put their version of it into the budget, knowing that the legislature will have to adopt some budget before they get to go home. So by seeing the Senate put this provision in their budget, if you have to choose between the two, it just shows they're going to fight for that language versus the House language. Still don't know how it'll come out ultimately, but that's sort of the forecast or the projection we can see if that makes a difference in the language you want to adopt. Mr. Hershey.
I would favor silence and put away. I think it's totally unreasonable to try to enforce or check or whatever. No, kids are just going to put on silent and put away anyways when they're supposed to. Most of them are not going to turn it off, and we're not checking 160, well, it would be 160, but we're not checking 100,000 cell phones every day to ensure they're off. That would be a ridiculous waste of time.
Other thoughts, Ms. Gordon?
Yes, I too support the silent input away. While I completely support supporting a policy that prevents distractions and from instruction, I also want to say that the cell phone also is used to make sure that we are developing 21st century learners. There are several educators who use the cell phone for instruction. And when you think about having it off and put away, when we go back to those emergencies, God forbid if something happens, trying to fumble and turn the phone back on, that's too much of a time risk, in my opinion.
Other thoughts, Ms. Caulfield?
I was also like the option B for the silence and put it away, but I wanted to know, do we need to add the AirPods? Because I know that's probably something that we all assume is in that language.
Earbuds is covered by AirPods.
Okay, yeah, I just was curious about that language. Okay.
Before we go back, I'll give you the last word on it. That's Chair Swanson.
Yeah, I think option B, at the note that I had wrote and showed to Chair Hagerty was maybe a definition around put away. Because, again, this is new. This is, again, trying to change human behavior. And so putting away a phone could mean simply sliding it under your leg. It's away. It's silent. However, I do think I would love to see a little bit more, maybe in an R&P, what that looks like, or in the student code of conduct, so it's very clear for parents and for students to understand what that means.
Okay.
I will tell you that of the districts that we looked at for option A and option B, off and put away is the position held by Winston-Salem, Forsyth, Charlotte Meck, Cabarrus, Union, and those are all North Carolina and Montgomery County, Maryland. Silent and put away is held by Fairfax County, Virginia, LA Unified, and Hillsborough County, Florida.
So up to this point, we've had a lot of consensus and a lot of agreement. I don't want to throw a bomb into that, but Mr. Swanson, Vice Chair Swanson has got me thinking. So I want to bring up this concern, see what you all think about it, and then we'll let people go back who have additional comments. So understanding and appreciating everything that's been said about option B, and to Vice Chair Swanson's point about the definition of putting away, we know that most of these devices can be used and accessed while put away. And for me, if the whole purpose of the policy is to avoid distraction and to avoid use of the device, then simply putting it away by itself doesn't necessarily stop that. So the item about location services, I think, is persuasive to me. And what you all have said around the table is persuasive to me. But how do we address that issue of use? Not where the phone is, but is it something as simple as just having in the policy a statement that use of the device is prohibited during this time, and it is silent and put away? Ms. Mahaffey?
So I think we answer our own question in the draft policy, because the policy says wireless communication devices. And it says, for the purpose of this policy, wireless communication devices are any portable devices that have the capability to provide voice, messaging, or other data communication between two or more parties. Such devices may include cellular telephones and similar devices, smartphones, smartwatches, smart glasses, tablet computers, laptop computers, gaming devices. And so really what I think the bigger piece is going to be is the headphones and earbuds, because the phone or the watch and the smart glasses are kind of covered by those pieces, and I don't know of headphones that have AirDrop capabilities, but maybe they do now. I don't know.
Or you might have just given somebody an idea.
Maybe one of our entrepreneurial students will figure that out.
Mr. Hershey?
So I'll read this language. Phone accessories are also to be silenced and away when phone use is prohibited. Smartwatches that serve a dual purpose may be worn, but the phone features texting, internet viewing, and calls are to be off when phone use is prohibited. Everyone knows where I got that. Fairfax County.
Fairfax County.
That's it.
I think that, I like the idea of option A. I think option B allows for more flexibility and is just more realistic for enforcement. And it's easier to say, put that away, as opposed to checking to make sure a device is quiet. But if you hear a buzz and it's in a backpack, we aren't asking our educators to be on high alert if they hear somebody's phone buzzing in a cubby or, on the floor if it's put away. It's not ideal. I know that it's a lot, but I think the point is to make sure we're educating students, and I would hope that if it becomes excessive and we know it's from one kid, then a conversation can be had versus, yeah.
So for me, again, I can see a lot of family, student, and parent concerns about the benefits of passive access, right? That the location services, for example, having the location service on doesn't impair the student's ability to pay attention in class or anything like that. So I have no problem with keeping that permitted. It just is, and maybe it's not here with device status, but maybe it's more if we're talking about student activity, that we're just really clear that use of the device is prohibited more so than where the device is. I'm perfectly okay with option B so long as we do have it stated that use in the classroom, unless directed by the teacher or some other instructional time, is prohibited. So I think we can take care of my concerns so long as we have clear language on that other side. Does that make sense?
And I like the language that Mr. Hershey brought up
Yeah.
from his second favorite school district.
I grew up there, so I'm allowed to like that one.
Fair enough. Further comment, Vice Chair Swanson?
I mean, I'm definitely in favor of it, but again, if the Senate version passes, then that's the law of the land at this point, so I just want to throw that out there, so there's no contradictions.
We put out our preference and then see what happens. Is everyone good with that?
Yes.
All right, Dr. Crane?
Okay, so we will see you next week at Policy Committee on April 29th. I've already mentioned House Bill 87, Senate Bill 55. On April 7th, Governor Stein announced his Council for Student Safety and Wellbeing. Their first issue, that was announced on April 7th, their first meeting was on April 14th. And their first issue, their first priority, is best practices for school systems to implement cell phone-free policies.
So, Dr. Crane, if I could for a moment, I'd like to ask the rest of the board, we're developing our own policy, but for the organization that Dr. Crane just mentioned, if they're actually putting together best practices, how would you feel about asking staff to forward some potential concerns to the state as they work on state policy? Particularly this issue around liability is one that concerns me, and that's one the state could address by law to protect our staff. That might be a little more effective than if we just tried to do it internally. What do you all think? Is that Vice Chair Swanson?
So it's very fitting that the co-chair is a member of the Wake delegation, who I shared all these concerns with thus far. And I know at that press conference it was indicated that they will, give out sample policies, but it's also up to districts. So I do think we can share our policies and get feedback, and also, to your point, share those. But I do think it's helpful that we have someone here in Wake County that can be close enough to give us some insight as well.
So it's not fallen on deaf ears.
It has not.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Dr. Crane, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to our next topic on the agenda, which I know is, I'm not even going to bother making up a joke. It's an update on migration to Oracle Release 12.2 and the twice per month pay project.
I just go to the Mighty Ducks.
I knew that's why all the cameras are here. This is what they wanted to call it. I got my flag normally. The next class of
Twice a week, twice monthly. Still want to make it semi-annual
All right, thank you, Mr. Badulala. I see you have your staff here. Are you presenting, or is someone else presenting?
No, I will be doing a little bit of intro, and then Jeff and David will finish it off.
All right, thank you. Anytime that you're ready, proceed.
All right. Good afternoon, Board Chair Haggerty, board members, Dr. Taylor. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Oracle ERP update. As you all know, it was a pretty significant lift last year. We want to basically give a board an update about what we have done, some of the lessons we have learned out of that exercise. We'll also talk about what is that we have done with phase one of the twice a month payroll. So just a little bit of history and background, just to kind of ground us. We use Oracle ERP in Wake County Public Schools. It's about 25 years old. We definitely put on new tires and put a new coat of paint last year. But again, ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. It's any ERP for a large organization. It's a lifeblood for the business operations, right? So we use the Oracle ERP. On the human resources side, it manages all the employee information, the payroll, the benefits, the time and attendance, the employee self-service, the manager self-service, and everything. And on the financial side, it takes care of the financial reporting, the general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, fixed assets, and catchment, pretty significant system for the business operations, right? And just a reflection about where we were last year, this time, when we spoke about the whole .2 upgrade and why we have to do that. I just want to kind of talk about and kind of set a baseline about where we were last year. So obviously, the big thing was we were paying Oracle about $250,000 on an annual basis because we were operating a, I guess, end-of-life Oracle system to gain that additional support. We were paying Oracle $250,000 every year, and we did that for 4 years. So that's almost $1 million. So we don't have to do that anymore. We're done, right? So, and the operational compliance risk, obviously, when you're operating a end-of-life system or a software, obviously, we were looking at payroll delays. It can happen anytime, right? But again, when you're operating an end-of-life software, you cannot upgrade the system. There's a lot of limitations. The third-party software do not work the way you want to work. But also, had a really old hardware, so that could have crashed anytime, right? So there was a lot of risk which were involved. So it was a high-priority project. It was a big rock last year. So we actually crossed that bridge, but we wanted to provide an upgrade. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about the 12.2 upgrade. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sasha. Well, we did in fact upgrade to 12.2 from 12.1. And like Sasha said, we put new tires and paint. I think it was a little bit more than that. We had all new storage, all new servers, which encompassed new operating systems. Everything's new, including the cables. This was a completely new install. And we did in fact hit our target of going live January 1. We met all of the business and technical objectives with this upgrade, all of them. We are currently now in what we call the stabilizing period, so we're stabilizing the system. And we are in a good place. It is quite stable, and a lot of the tweaking that's needed has already taken place. What worked? It was a very successful transition. I think it's worth noting this was a tremendous collaborative effort, not just tech services, all departments. The entire district really came to this transition to this new upgrade and really worked together quite well. It was really, everybody wants to be on a winning team. We were a winning team to get to the finish line. So tremendous collaboration. Through that collaboration, there was rigorous testing, tremendous amount of testing. And you're not just testing to see if things work, you're trying to break it. The 10 things you have to do every day, you do those 10 things, but you do the 10 things you don't do. So there was a tremendous amount of testing to make sure to ensure that the system was ready to go. We also implemented a mature project management. In the past, we would certainly have a structure, but this methodology that we utilized here was very robust. We had testing scripts. We really made sure that all the metrics were tracked. We utilized a new tool to do so as well. And this also allowed for communication and stakeholder engagement. The scoreboard is how I like to refer to it. You always want to know what the score is in the game. In a project, it's always good to be able to go somewhere to see where you are in the project and where you need to go. Lessons learned. So when we went live, we did have a couple of bumps, as expected. We had some printing issues. Now, we did upgrade, but we are still on an antiquated platform. And printing services are somewhat, I say antiquated, but they are old. It's an old plug-in method that we use. And we did have some tweaking and some issues with printing. Optimization, so performance. Also to be expected, there needed to be some tweaking on the physical resources of the environment. Add a little bit of memory here, add some more storage here, those types of things. Operational constraints. Limited resources. We didn't add any physical full-time employees to this job. We did everything that in-house with the personnel that we had. Also, we had a lot of parallel efforts that was going on. We'll get to twice a month pay in a minute, but that was another significant amount of work at the exact same time with the exact same resources. So the resolutions that implemented, we were able to fix the printing issues. We We had a couple of navigational issues when we went live, and we were able to tweak the performance as well. Twice month pay, also successful. We also met the go live date of January. Some of the payroll metrics on that first payroll, there was roughly 3390 in that payroll run, that first one, and approximately 49 had payroll errors in their actual pay. That represents approximately 1.4% of that were actually processed. As the errors were identified, we quickly, again, collaboratively between tech services, accounting, compensation services, we worked to mitigate those, make sure that everybody was communicated if you had an error, and we remedied those in the very next payroll. A lot of the adjustments that needed to take place was keying. So the frequency of when you had to key something has changed. So the game has changed a little bit of when you have to have everything completed. And some of the formulas in Oracle that actually fire the payroll had to be adjusted as well. There's a lot of scenarios when you have 3,000 people. There's a lot of scenarios within each of those individuals in terms of the way they're configured and how they get paid. And some of the formulas had to be tweaked as well. We did that as well. So additional validations have been put into place to help with validating the pay, making sure. Here at Wake County, we want to pay everybody 100% right. There's no measure to have a penny off. So we always take the opportunities to make sure everything's 100% right. And then we get to phase 2.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the last couple slides to talk about phase 2 and our plans. So just to clarify and confirm who is in phase 1, who is in phase 2. Phase 1 included our bus drivers, our safety assistants in transportation, our school-based CNS staff, and we also included our substitute teachers, not the permanent sub, but just a true substitute teacher. So now who is in phase 2? Let me start by saying who's not in phase 2. Our certified staff are not in phase 2. State law says we cannot pay them twice a month. We have to pay them once a month. School administrators are not in phase 2. Central office administrators are not in phase 2. And central tech band employees are not in phase 2. Well, then who is remaining in phase 2? It's all the other graded class 5 positions that go from step 17 all the way through 30, other than those that were in phase 1. The initial target date set for phase 2 is to go live July 1st of this calendar year. Some lessons learned as it applies to phase 2 from phase 1. Well, as we anticipated, additional staff time was required to enter pay. Whether you're entering a 40 into a system or a 20 into a system, it takes the same amount of time. If you're doing it twice a month, it's taking twice as much effort. Once we get our online time entry, which is a module for Oracle, up and live, that will mitigate the impact of keying it twice a month, but it won't make it go away, because proofing of it and checking of it still has to take place and take place twice a month instead of once a month. Our target to have that online is the fall of this calendar year. And the last 2 bullets you see up there, salary role alignment and core Oracle configuration completed. Those are things that our tech services, HR, and compensation services have to keep our eyes on to keep things going accurately for both phase 1 and phase 2, both through transition and ongoing. So a couple additional considerations for phase 2 as we look at that implementation twice a month. We now know that we have a July 1 go live date for our student information system, I should say our new student information system that we're migrating to Infinite Campus. And we do anticipate a learning curve will be in place for all users of this, including front office staff, school administration, teachers, and central office staff, primarily tech services and academics. And also July is the time that our year-round schools are beginning their new school year. So if we go to the next slide, and the last slide, as a result of lessons learned, the need to go live with Infinite Campus on July 1, and our year-round schools just beginning the new year, we're recommending that we postpone the live data phase 2 until the fall of 2025, just a few months. This will give the school-based and centrally based staff an opportunity to work through the learning curve of Infinite Campus, we hope. Get to the other side of the opening of the new school year for both our year-round modified and traditional schools, and getting our online time entry live. And just one last item of note, in an effort to get feedback from our Phase 1 staff and the bus driver safety assistant and CNS in the schools, we recently sent them a short survey, so I think just 3 or 4 questions, seeking feedback back from them on how they felt implementation of the twice-a-month pay went, and some related questions, including has it assisted them in what we were desiring to do. And once we have the feedback from that, we will share it with the board. We'll also use it to inform our implementation of Phase 2.
All right. Questions for the board? Questions from the board. Mr. Hershey.
Excellent work. I was thinking, as you all have been doing this, that we hear a lot in the news at the federal level about upgrading technology and all this. There's a lot of stuff I don't like going on up there, but they do talk about that, and people are not aware that we have actually been doing that work prior to what's happening at that level. So I really want to commend you all. I think this is great work. I do support the delay in the Phase 2. My question around that is, you have the online time entry targeted for fall, and then Phase 2 right after that. Are we condensing too much where we should kind of build in an expectation?
Well, and I'll speak, Shashina and Jeff. Our thought is, I think on the biggest concern is not going live with online time entry. I think the biggest challenge with a little bit of unknown is what this transition to Infinite Campus is going to be, and how much cheese are we really moving the front offices of the schools, for the school administrators, for the teachers, and then for support staff back here.
Yeah, I'll add salary adjustments, what we call salary roll. Not knowing exactly when we're going to actually process that, that's a pretty significant variable. You don't want to do both at the same time or in the same pay period. So it can go either after or before, once we know that's already.
So, if I could add, and it was not part of the formal presentation, it was my thought that as the summer goes on, we come back to the board with an update on how Infinite Campus implementation is going, because the year-round school, we're going to start using it in July. We're not going to need to wait for traditional to open up, and also give a better sense of then how we're looking for the lineup of the online time entry, and then ultimately the twice a month.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, so two updates on that. One is May 20th, I think the work session, we are bringing an update on Infinite Campus to make sure the board is aware of what is happening. There's a heavy lift which is happening right now as we speak, so we want to make sure the board is aware of what's happening. Going back to the time entry piece, there are two pieces. One is the electronic absence management, right? Even till today, we are doing our leave sheets in a piece of paper. We're going to make it everything electronic, meaning staff can use the system electronically, submit it to us for approval, and automatically enters the time piece, and then the digital time entry piece. So both of the things, I think, is going to make a significant improvement from the efficiency point.
They would answer my question.
Oh, kind of, yeah. Thank you. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you. I'm going to work backwards with the learning management system question. I know we have the update coming on May 20th, but as someone who has used PowerSchool for many, many years as a parent and prior to that, I know that July 1st, especially for our year-round families, is coming. and I'm glad Lisa's here, what is the communication plan for parents to know what's coming and how to utilize Infamous Campus? I know they don't have access to it yet, but, are we, Power School is going away, get ready for a new system?
I'm pointing to Sarah.
Sarah's got it? Okay.
So we've been working through this probably starting before January, putting together a plan by audience. We also have already started looking at the resources that EPI provided school districts as a part of phase 1 to give to parents to help them navigate the new space and the new platform. I've talked to a couple of principals just to get a pulse check on are they already getting questions? Are parents aware? So we're working to really time those comms closer to when parents are going to be able to log in and see, so we don't have to tell them, well, here's what you're going to see. So we do have things planned to roll out to parents and community in the coming months as we get closer to the July go live.
And then will parent access to Infinite Campus, and I promise this is my last Infinite Campus question, require, I think in order to get Power School access, I needed a notary. Is that still to prove I was who I was, or?
You still have that verification, and you will also get generated a unique number.
Okay.
To make sure that it's secure.
So I wouldn't get that until the school year began. I can't front load that.
It will be prior to that. We just don't know exactly the window.
I can wait till May on that one. And then David, you had mentioned the email sent out to our subs, our bus personnel, and our CNS staff. Is that solely through email, or is there a flyer with a website? Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
We did the survey prior.
Okay.
We did the same survey with this group and the potential phase 2 group in March of last year. We did a flyer. We also worked really closely with supervisors of those staff to say, hey, this is coming. Can you help us encourage your folks, show them the flyer, give them the QR code. This time around for this survey, we used a different survey platform, which we're super excited about because it automatically translates for those employees that may not, which that's their first language. Do you have those employees? And so, yes, all the things. So they can scan it with their phones. It's accessible, easy to navigate, and then we're going to the different channels to make sure that as many staff in that group as possible can give us their feedback.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Other questions for staff? Vice Chair Swanson.
Thank you so much for these updates, and I know it was a lot of work that went into this. I'm very appreciative of that. My question is very simple. Those employees that are in phase 2, are they able to opt out of bi-monthly pay if they choose to?
That's a loaded question. I think it's a one-way street, unfortunately, because if we give that option, it's going to be an operational nightmare. So our recommendation would be to make sure everybody's a part of that.
It really is everyone either maintaining as is monthly or everyone in that phase 2 group moving to twice a month.
All right. Any other questions? Well, let me say, you saw the cameras all immediately vacate.
Yeah.
We turned off of cell phones to this, but this was an important topic, and we really appreciate your work updating us on this pay issue that staff has been very concerned about, and especially, the issue with the Oracle migration. We talk all the time about where we can find operational efficiency, and this was one area that, had continued to be a recurring issue for us, and we're very satisfied and very proud of the work done on this. So thank you for that, and thank you for the updates. All right. All right, and now we'll turn to the last item on our work session agenda, the budget work session on the proposed 2025-26 operating budget. Mr. Nieder will stay at the table, and we'll invite Terry Kinsey up.
Pull up the, not the Q&A, but one on the left, please.
You have the clicker over there, Dave.
I do, thank you. Okay, this is your second formal budget work session discussing the proposed operating budget for year 2025-2026. As needed, you've got one more work session scheduled a week from today during the Finance Committee meeting. So today, we're going to review board member questions and staff responses that have been submitted since your last meeting 2 weeks ago. We're going to provide you some options to the proposed budget, the superintendent's proposed budget, based upon feedback we've heard from the board thus far, and then turn it over to the board for any ongoing discussion. And then after that, we'll confirm what your next steps are between now and the board adopting a proposed budget. So with that, and we're not going to put it up here, but I will let for the public to know, the Q&A that we're going to start reviewing verbally, it's posted online, it's in Assembly, or for members in here that want to look at it, you can pull it up digitally. And Ms. Kimsey, can I ask you to begin reviewing that?
Sure. So the first question asked that if we were to reduce the funding for the Restart Schools from $5 million to $4 million, and if we were to decrease the supplies budget for schools another $5 from $60 to $55, would that be enough to cover the $2.5 million needed to reinstate the employer contribution for dental? And it would not be, because those two adjustments would be $1.8 million. So it would be short of the $2.5 million. The next question is, will the reduction in the clerical staff impact any Restart or Title I schools? So the clerical formula changes at middle and high school do impact 4 schools that are Title I or Restart. East Wake High School is Title I, Nightdale High School is Title I and Restart, South Garner is Title I, and Southeast Raleigh is Title I and Restart. The next question, do we have 14 administrative leadership positions in technology? What would be the national average for leadership roles in this department for our size? Is this due to the amount of Chromebooks and hotspots that we've given to each staff and every student? Would it be possible to conserve devices for students in need only, and then have classroom devices in classrooms for students to use? What type of savings could that bring? Our Technology Services Division currently has 4 senior director positions and 11 directors. The administrative leadership positions in technology are below the typical range for school districts that serve over 150,000 students. Large districts of our size usually have 20 to 25 leadership roles. Orange County Public Schools in Florida, with 209,000 students, has 20 to 25 leadership roles. Charlotte Meck in North Carolina, with about 140,000 students, has 17 to 20. Dallas, Texas, has about 139,000 students and 18 to 22 leadership roles. These figures reflect the broader staffing needed to manage infrastructure, cybersecurity, instructional tech, data systems, and support services. The next question is, when do we expect to refresh the Chromebook devices that were handed out to staff and students in 2020? Wake County School System is currently developing a sustainable technology strategy to ensure long-term effectiveness of our investments. A recent survey gathered from families and community on district-issued devices. All options will be reviewed, and feedback will guide formal recommendations to be presented to the board soon. In 2020, Chromebooks were distributed exclusively to students as part of a large-scale one-to-one initiative. Staff did not receive Chromebooks. Given the 4 to 5 year life cycle of Chromebooks, we have proactively begun the refresh cycle to ensure students have access to reliable technology. The current refresh targets students in grades 3, 6, and 9. Devices collected from this process are evaluated and repurposed as appropriate. Is this a possible savings option? And if so, what would that savings be? And it's about outdated software. We're executing a multi-year technology plan to modernize the infrastructure and systems our students and staff rely on every day. District-wide effort includes major upgrades to both school-based and central systems aimed at streamlining operations, cutting cost, and enhancing service delivery. By adopting scalable modern solutions, including AI-powered tools for transforming how we support teaching, learning, and district operations. Recent progress includes upgrades to core business systems, as you just heard a minute ago, and upcoming launches of business intelligence platforms, invoice automation, a new student information system, digital absence and time management, along with several infrastructure and security enhancements. It's more than a tech refresh, it's a strategic investment in a stronger, more agile, and future-ready school system. As we budget for technology, is this accurate that we've disposed of 80,000 Chromebooks in the last 3 years? We currently have an inventory of retired or damaged Chromebooks that are pending further action, including potential disposal, repair, or redeployment. At this time, the exact number of units designated for disposal has not been finalized. Our primary objective is to maximize the usability of the devices in support of student learning. Whenever possible, we aim to repair the Chromebooks and return them to circulation for student use. In cases where full repair is not feasible, we evaluate parts that we could potentially harvest, cannibalizing non-functional units to assemble operational devices that meet standards for deployment. Disposal will be considered only after all other options have been exhausted. It's important to note that our approach prioritizes reuse and recovery if possible. How much is our budget for help desk and number of staff? Is it possible to see savings with this suggestion of possibly consolidating those? Our technology services help desk has 7 agents who, in collaboration with technology support staff, manage more than 140,000 support tickets annually. Across the district, we have multiple specialized help desks, each equipped with staff and tools tailored to the specific content areas. This distributed model is designed to address the diverse and unique needs of our users. While many team members are cross-trained, achieving first call resolution often demands deep expertise across multiple systems to deliver timely and accurate support. Moving forward, we will continue to evaluate opportunities to consolidate help desk operations district-wide to identify potential cost savings and enhance service efficiency. Question 8 is a concern about removing needs and functions at the classroom level. Is there a way to consolidate any of these roles? Administrative reductions covered multiple areas, including contracted services, supplies and materials, workshop expenses, elimination of software applications, reductions in travel, and others. 90% of the school district's operating budget is in our schools. On a percentage basis, over the past 17 years, central office has taken the majority of budget reductions. And although the central services currently represents 9% of the overall operating budget, central services represents 38% of the reductions in the superintendent's proposed budget. Do we have many positions that do not require a 40-hour work week? Could those roles be consolidated? Any of the positions that we currently have that do not require a full-time work week are already part-time. Is it accurate that our budget is 53% towards teacher salaries? What is that dollar amount? And can we get a breakdown of the remaining 46%? So we are pointing you to the object code pages on pages 50 to 55 of the superintendent's proposed budget. It shows detailed breakdown of the budget within line items, within salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital outlay, and transfers to charter schools. You can see actually a very detailed listing of each thing. The staff budget on pages 56 to 57 shows a breakdown of months of employment by type. Looking at that data, the months of employment assigned to our schools, 183,000. Months that are budgeted centrally but work in our schools every day, 27,000. So a subtotal is 211,000 months of employment, or 94% of our staffing are based in schools. Central services months of employment, 12,000, which is 6%. The cost of teachers and instructional support salaries and benefits is approximately $1.2 billion, or 53% of the operating budget. The cost of staff not working in schools is about 5% of the operating budget. Do we have data on national averages needed in each department for a district our size? We've researched and have not been able to identify a resource with information about staffing levels. We are currently undergoing a market competitive study to compare salaries down to the departmental level. Could you provide clarity on when we would receive data regarding a structural study regarding salaries, positions, and national averages? An RFP was issued and a company was chosen to look at the capacity of Wake County School System current salary structure to compete in the marketplace. We anticipate the results of that study will be in place to inform decisions for the 26-27 budget. How many new counselors have we hired since 2016? In 2016-17, we allotted 3,847 school counselor months. That would be, roughly, that'd be about 384 counselors. The school counselor allotment to schools in 24-25 was 5,259 months, or about 525 positions. So we've grown about 136 positions, or 1,362 months. Provide details about the differences between the counselor positions affected by the formula realignment and the positions to be funded in the program continuity for behavioral health support services budget item. So I do want to make clear that on the program continuity item in the superintendent's proposed budget, we are covering the cost that this current year was paid by the one-time federal funds from July to September. So any of the behavioral health support positions are already moved to the local budget and are being paid from the local budget. But the first 3 months of this year, some of them were paid by federal dollars. So for next year's budget, we've just got to cover that 3 months that was not on local dollars this year. And then we've shown you what the difference is in the formulas for both our middle and high schools, where the allotments were adjusted by the tiers of numbers of students. How much funding is included in the budget to support the move to twice monthly pay? And you just saw a presentation about that. There is no funding in the 25-26 budget to support the move to twice monthly pay. How much additional non-federal funding, if any, was required to offset the child nutrition services deficits? So while our child nutrition services budget has dropped below the required 2 months of operating, they still have a balance to cover costs. So their balance is not exhausted at this time. So at this time, no local dollars are needed, but it is something we monitor as the year progresses. How many vacancies remain in maintenance and operations, and how many of these have been open for 6 months or longer? And if there are vacancies, are these in danger of being phased out? Currently, maintenance and operations has 37 vacant positions for 444 months. 20 of those, or 240 months, have been vacant for 6 months or longer. At this time, there's no plan to eliminate any vacant positions in maintenance and operations. Keep in mind that when we have a vacant position, it doesn't equate to budget dollars that can be saved because we budget our salaries and benefits very closely to the total amount that we have hired each year. The next question is expressing that a concern to not be in favor of cuts to a lot of the items that affect the schools, building substitutes, counselors, social workers, nurses, dental insurance, restart allotments, and maintenance. And a question about the jewel funds and if those would be reinstated. The superintendent has made a commitment to ensure that the full amount of the vaping settlement funds will be available for use for anti-vaping initiatives over the 7-year period. Next question. For comparison, can you provide data on how the central office function has grown for the past 20 years? The district has grown significantly over the past 20 years. Comparing 2004-5 to 2023-24, we moved from 132 schools to 197, 114,000 students to 160,000, 15,000 staff to 20,000 staff. Public education, as you know, is human resource intensive. 80% of our district's budget is for staff salary and benefits. As the district has grown, there's been growth in staff and non-personnel support. Over the same 20-year period, our operating budget has grown from $800 million to $2.1 billion. Most of this increase is attributable to the increase in the number of staff to support our students in schools and the increase in non-personnel support. Inflation has been a major contributor to the increase in the non-personnel budget, and the wages, employer benefit rates, utility rate increases, and the cost of support contracts are some examples. For example, in 2004-05, our employer matching benefit rate that the system pays was 5.82%. So for every dollar in salary, we had to pay an additional $5.82 cents to the state retirement system. Currently, that employer matching rate is $25.02%, which is for every dollar we pay an additional 25.02 cents to the state retirement system. That's grown significantly, as has our employer health insurance. To get a sense of how the central office function has grown, we can look at growth in total expenditure over the 20-year period. Schools and direct school support grew 187%. Central office grew by 72%. During the same period, the cumulative rate of inflation, the CPI, was 61.1%. And that concludes the Q&A.
Yeah, and just a quick comment or clarification. You may have noticed some of the questions had after the question, some statements that were italicized. Those were submitted by the board members submitting the questions, but they were not the questions themselves.
All right, thank you, Terry. Thank you, David. So let me open up this discussion. Oh, go ahead.
Well, we do have some other options we'd like to present now, unless you would like to stay with the Q&A and ask any questions about staff responses.
Are there any questions about the staff responses at this time? I'd rather get that out of the way now before we get into the discussions of the new staff options. Okay. Well, I had some points, but not necessarily questions. I do think that if they're not questions, I'll save them for the end. So,
okay.
All right. Thank you, David.
Okay. Just have a few more things to share with the board. And there are a couple options for the board to consider based upon the feedback that the superintendent and his leadership team and other leadership staff have heard from the board as they've been in conversation about the proposed budget. And the first option to consider would be to remove from the proposed budget the proposal to shift dental insurance coverage premium responsibility. Employees currently pay $6 per month for their own coverage for dental insurance. So by taking this option, we would remove the changes to the dental insurance program included in the superintendent's budget and would maintain a $6 a month employee premium for self-dental insurance. So to do that, to implement that, and maintain the amount of county appropriation increase at $40.3 million would require identifying $2.5 million of other budget repurposing for the 2025-2026 school year. And the second option we'll throw out there, based upon some relatively consistent board member discussion and feedback, would be to remove from the proposed budget the recommendations that are in there to regional maintenance, energy and physical plant, and grounds maintenance, and to implement this option, and yet to maintain the amount of county appropriation increase request at $40.3 million will require identifying another $600,000 of budget repurposing. So between those two items, not doing anything to dental, leaving it at $6 a month for staff for self-coverage, pulling that piece out of the proposed budget, and also pulling the reductions in those three areas related to M&O out, will require that we identify $3.1 million of budget repurposing if the board is desirous of keeping the increased amount at $40.3 million. So we've got some options for how that could be repurposed. One opportunity would be to move or find a different funding source for approximately 15 coordinating teachers. These are certified staff that support our teachers in the schools through coaching, mentoring, training, and they can be moved either to the classroom, and we're currently looking at that, but we're also looking at alternate funding sources to keep them in that role, but not use state or local funding.
Can you share the total number of coordinating teachers?
I believe we have, is it 60? In one, just in academics, if I'm not mistaken.
50 plus just in the academics department.
Just in academics is 50 plus. And we have some, we have some in the other, that's academics out of all of academics. So you've got special needs has them, and student support services has them. And there are a couple other shops that have one or two here and there. And that savings or repurposing would be approximately $1.8 million. Another option to consider to support those two changes related to dental and M&O would be to adjust all of our building HVAC set points by 1 degree. This came up, I believe, 2 weeks ago in conversation. It's actually something that was implemented during the Great Recession, and then finally we were able to get around it subsequent to then. That would mean shifting heating set points from 70 degrees to 69 degrees, and shifting AC points from 73 degrees to 74 degrees, and the estimate save or repurpose budget here would be $500,000. And the third component would be to repurpose $1 million of community use funds and use those funds to backfill on our current local budget requirements to fund background checks for volunteers in our schools and also our school-based utility costs. We've done a review of historical community use carryover amounts and looked at annual expenditure and revenue rates, and we believe this shift of $1 million of repurposing would support this without impacting the community use program. So this slide is just a summary of those three items. It would create a savings or repurposing of just over the amount to reinstate or reverse the dental and the M&O, which I think was $3.1 million. So that we simply share with the board for their consideration. Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to you, Chair Haggerty.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nieder. I know that we have some questions. I saw Ms. Caulfield and Ms. Mahaffey. We'll come over to Ms. Gordon, and then we'll just go around the table.
Well, on slide 18, I appreciate the conserving the savings. I think Ms. Mahaffey had brought that up with the air conditioning. I was brought up that way with my father trying to save, so I appreciate that. My question is the coordinating teachers, you said other roles. Can you clarify where we would put them, and will they have a reduction in pay? Like, how would that work?
There would be no reduction in pay. We're required based on their licensure and the contracts we have with them. There are contracts similar to a teacher. And they would either be placed in the classroom and take over a teaching assignment. And as we have teacher turnover each year, and we have to replace those teachers, these would become one of them. Or they, and we're looking at this, would continue in their current role as a coordinating teacher, but we would identify an alternate funding source, perhaps a grant-based funding source. Either way, it creates those savings.
Yeah, so to add to that, we know that there are roughly 50 or so in academics, but you all correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about 160 coordinating teachers across the district. And so now administration is looking at all those positions to identify where those 15 would come from. We know there are some that we absolutely will not be looking at for repurposing or part of this reduction. Think about the exceptional children's program. That might be one of those areas. There are some positions that will be vacant as well, that will be a part of the repurposing as well. And so hopefully when we go through, we'll be able to minimize the number of teachers that might actually end up having to go into a different position back to the classroom, or having a different funding source. But that's what we're evaluating right now. We are extremely confident that we can find 15 that will not impact the overall effort of coordinating teachers.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. If I can follow up.
Follow up?
I just wanted to know, with the repurposing, because it sounds like it's the same thing, what does that look like for the community use funds? What would we repurpose? Like, if you had an example.
It's not a loss of anything. It's just a balance that they have that they carry over. And again, it's not taking anything away.
Okay.
It's using just an available balance.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Mahaffey, then Ms. Gordon.
Yeah, I just, when we can find out where, if we choose to go with moving the coordinating teachers, what departments or what areas are impacted, because unless all of them are coming out of academics, but I guess we're not sure yet, is what you stated. Okay. And I hope that we can find additional funding. Fingers crossed, but who knows. I do want to say on slide 8 with regards to the HVAC, I want to insert a little bit of understanding that for our schools that have a 4th floor, that 1 degree is a huge piece. And so, Mark, I know as we're factoring this in, if you're on the 4th floor where your science labs are on a hot day, that 1 degree can make a difference, and sometimes not. But I don't know if we can add a caveat in there for our high schoolers that will be sweltering. But I do want to recognize that sometimes it is a little extra toasty up there on a summer day.
Thank you. Ms. Gordon.
So my question is around, I think it hits on both Ms. Caulfield's and Ms. Mahaffey's question around where these 15 coordinating teacher roles will come from. We just heard from CTE in the Student Achievement Committee meeting, and they talked about how they have coordinating teachers that support with PD for CTE teachers, and this is just one example. They also have coordinating teachers to improve recruitment, retention, and training, which I can imagine all coordinating teachers do. And in the landscape that we're in, with even trying to recruit educators and recruit teachers, and one of the causes behind that difficulty is because they don't have the support. So when we talk about eliminating 15 coordinating teacher positions, I go back to my original question: where are these 15 positions coming from? And I hear you when you say we are going to, hope for and look for other funding to possibly not have to move these 15 coordinating teachers, but I guess my question is, has that been done in the past, and in what capacity? Yeah, that's my question.
So again, part of what we're doing is administration is going back and identifying where is the best position to identify the 15 coordinating teachers. And so as I said, I know there's some areas that we will not be looking at, and exceptional children is one of those. If we have vacancies, that means those positions are already there, but the support is not being provided because it's vacant. There may be positions where we have multiple teachers in those positions, and hypothetically we have 15 teachers that provide literacy support. We may decide to reduce that to 13 teachers. And so they're still going through the process of identifying where those 15 will come from. And so as soon as we're able to have that information, we'll share that to the board, because we already know that's one thing that you do want to know is who will the 15 be, where are they coming from.
And that would be if this is something the board desires to adjust the budget, if there is no change.
We'll open it up to some other questions going around. I wanted to start with a couple things just for clarification, if I could. There's a couple things that I wondered about where board members have seen and evaluated potential impacts of cuts. Understanding the need for a balanced budget, what I'm wondering is if the administration would be open to revising how some of those cuts could be implemented. So this is the first time I've suggested this, so I apologize that it's new. But for example, with some of the formula alignments, formula realignments we've seen, we saw that, for example, I think, let me go back, I don't want to guess, let me look at the exact slide. Some of the secretarial cuts were coming from Title I schools. If we have a readjustment of the formula, could we also apply an acuity model to it based on the needs and the challenges at the school, so that maybe we still target the number of reductions, but perhaps we look to schools that might have more resources, a larger volunteer base, more private funding, that maybe those impacts won't be as severe as impacts on the schools with the most lower income students?
So the answer to that would be yes. I know part of what we'll need to do is look at when allotment formulas have gone out and the time we would need to make those adjustments. Terry, I'll let you speak to what has already gone out to schools.
Yeah, we've already begun the process for allocations for next year. We started a little bit earlier due to the implementation of the Think Campus. So we have already rolled out the allocations to our schools using these new formulas. For the particular schools that you're mentioning, keep in mind that there are resources the area superintendents have access to provide resources beyond formula to our restart schools. And these schools also do have Title I resources that they can access. We've got the funds that we are using to help schools coming out of Title I for a year. And during this next year, we also plan to have a project where we're evaluating all of our allotment formulas and doing a thorough examination of those and to see if we need to change how we are allocating resources. That project has not begun at this time, but it will soon.
And what Ms. Kimsey is referring to is not for next year's budget, but it's really a long-term. Let's look at all of our allotment formulas holistically as a district. We have not done that. At any point since I've been here, we've tweaked and tweaked and tweaked, and this would be a step back, but again, independent of this budget process for next year.
Okay.
And I think to sum up what Ms. Kimsey said, I think that at least for the 4 schools impacted by the clerical, that may be a higher need, we've given them, they have some options to backfill, if you will, if that's a choice they wanted to make.
Okay. I have some other questions about some of the formula alignments that we're looking at. With the continued funding of the counselors and the behavioral support positions that are part of program continuity, and then the counselor alignment, we know that we've had vacancies in counselor positions. Is the alignment more about where the positions are assigned around the district, or is it about number of positions total? In that, if we have this formula alignment, are we, will anyone be at risk of losing employment?
Now, our intent does not include a reduction in force. Our intent is to try to, and it's complex, to try to segment it, is to just as a district have a handful fewer counselors, but not to let anyone go, and then realign the formula so by having fewer counselors, our formula for allotment still doesn't over-allot.
The adjustment is counselors and social work.
And it's
So,
both.
And it was looking at positions that are either vacant or will be vacant by the end of this fiscal year. And then the formula was realigned.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you about the maintenance and operation positions. And here, it sounded like we had 37 vacant positions, but 20 of those vacancies had been open for 6 months or longer. Now, what I'd like to suggest to everyone is that I think if the job is open for 6 months or longer, it speaks to supply and demand in the labor market. It speaks in terms of competitiveness of pay. And, this is an area that, we know month after month after month, people come to us with concerns about our ability to take care of the maintenance and operations of our buildings. And so here, I saw that, lapsed pay wasn't necessarily the issue, but I'm wondering if we're not eliminating any positions, but they're remaining vacant and open, is this somewhere we're perhaps taking some of those vacant positions, reducing the number, but increasing the compensation might help fill those open positions that have been open for quite some time, maybe attracting some talent. We had looked at that during the pandemic for some high-need essential positions. I didn't know if that was something here where we could address that need without necessarily spending more.
And so the answer to that would be yes. I know that one of the questions I get all the time is if we have a position that we fund at a higher rate, what does that do for the other positions? And so everything to me is all about what the market requires and what's needed in order to have someone to do that position. And so, you and I have talked about that, and I tell people that I can do literally every job in the district, but I do not know how to network computers. And so when we think about technicians, that is a market-driven position, and they're always going to be paid higher. So we will be looking at those specific positions and doing the things to make them more compatible in the market and increasing those salaries. And so the answer to that would be yes.
So it's something that could require a change in the budget, but wouldn't necessarily require a change in the dollar amount spent. It's just a reallocation within that salary band.
Absolutely. So if hypothetically we have, dollars spent on these positions, you reduce the number of positions, increase the dollar amount, or there's just a whole different number of ways that you can make that adjustment. But the actual budget number in maintenance doesn't need to change, but you can reallocate dollars, put more in the contract, less in the contract. And so that's something that I know Mark and I will be looking at, because we know in many of those instances when they are vacant, those dollars may be used to support contract work. So you have to know when that balance and shift has to take place.
Mr. Dieter?
Yeah, and a couple additional thoughts. One, we do have out a market competitive study, which will, less than a year from now, but the board understands it's an extensive study, will show not only for our central office staff, but we're having them look at school-based staff as well, how competitive are we or are we not in the marketplace to compete for employees? So that's something that will inform this. And let me perhaps add to, though, more from a technical standpoint, what Dr. Taylor just shared. Yes, we can take a vacant position or vacant positions and convert them to dollars. In the past, we've been very comfortable doing that. Okay, the midpoint on the salary for this position is X dollars. Let's eliminate position and take those X dollars and convert them to contract dollars. We're not at that point anymore. And the reason we're not at that point is our fill rates have gone from during the pandemic and even post-pandemic, well below what we would like, to now, in most positions, within a point or two of full completion or full fill. To give an example, counselors and social workers. I think our vacancy rates there are under 2% in each of those two positions. So that said, and by simply looking at, we are not lapsing salaries into our over-under account currently. Any wide-scale elimination of a vacant position is not going to turn into a dollar value. So we're really going to have to very closely look at that to evaluate what capacity we would have by elimination of positions to create funding on any kind of wide-scale basis. And I think this market study will as well inform us.
We have a HR compensation review process that's underway all the time in the system. One example would be, and it really doesn't even have to go through the full process, in our custodial services. Sometimes it's better to have positions, sometimes it's better for contract dollars. So there is fluidity in Mark's area, and he can convert contract dollars to create custodial positions. He can close custodial positions to create contract dollars, whatever's most beneficial at the time. Maintenance and operations could do the same. So that internal process that we currently have, if there are dollars available within what we already have to make adjustments either to or from staff, that's something that can occur.
Mr. Strickland?
If I may, and I'd like to also add, because we've been stagnant in M&O for such a long time with the number of employees, we have employees that may be at an administrative level that have long been doing senior administrative work. So we're also working on some comp cases to better align the work that they're actually doing and get them in the right spot. So that's another opportunity for us to create some pathways at work.
Knowing where we are with as many needs as we have, I've been reluctant to bring a proposal to the board for adding more money. We know that we've looked at multi-year plans for aligning this formula that normally would be about an additional $5 million or so a year. And looking at the other needs you all have identified that we need to take care of, I know that we can't go forward with what would have been the next step in that multi-year plan. But I also know that if we don't do anything, we can't expect different results. And this is an area that we have, I think, we've heard clearly from the public there is demand for addressing these problems. So if we can try something new that might help move the needle and evaluate those results, see if they help us with some of these long-term vacant positions where just the labor market, salaries have changed, and we're unable to fill these, I think that might be something that we can do. Again, reallocating in the budget, but not having to look for any additional cut. Mr. Nieder?
Yeah, and I'd like to, Dr. Matillo, I'm not totally put you on the spot.
Thank you, sir.
We have recently, when I say recently, not in the past few weeks or even the past few months, I think it was perhaps last fall, maybe it was a little bit more recently, created a full-time recruiting position just for M&O positions. And it's having a significant positive impact. AJ, without being prepared, could you just share some high-level feedback on that, please?
Yeah, we were actually able to work with Mark to identify funding to be able to fund that position. We hired about 40 folks in that position since January. And I think what it's allowing us to do is really, just like we did with bus drivers, have a dedicated resource to sourcing all of those leads that we have. So if we're making some progress, I think what it's also going to allow us to do is to determine if we have this dedicated resource and we're still not able to fill the position, that could be more data to say maybe it is a compensation issue or another issue that we need to look at. So we're seeing some progress and we'll continue to work.
But yeah, one of the challenges as a district, our human resource function is primarily focused on recruiting school-based staff and really their teachers. And so each of our departments kind of own the lion's share of recruiting within the departments. And what we've done with bus drivers and now just begun a few months ago with M&O is recognize those departments don't have the capacity. And we've seen not magic wand, but we've seen material improvement in bus drivers, and I believe we're beginning to see the same thing in maintenance and operations.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Vice Chair Swanson.
Yes. I just wanted to reiterate the point. I know Mr. Neal and I spoke about this, and Chair Harry just raised this question, but it was a lot of information out there that there's current counselors that are sitting in these positions that are going to lose positions. So glad to know that that is not accurate, and it's vacant positions. And yes, so that's one piece I just wanted to make sure that those folks are listening are aware of that. So I'm not inclined to support the removal of the coordinating teachers. But I do have a proposal that I would submit for consideration, which would have been, I think, the first question that Ms. Kimsey raised, which was a question I submitted about reducing the restart and the supplies, which would equate to that 1.8, to reserve that 1.8 million for those coordinating teachers, to include the dental and securing the pieces for maintenance and operation. I just think that there's no great option. We know that. We also know that we have to stay with the parameters that we are given. I mean, do what you choose, but that's what I'm leaning towards. But I think that's just where I'm leaning. And so I know that there'll be some additional questions, but that's just the proposal I wanted to put out for folks to consider.
Thank you. Mr. Hershey, and then anyone who hasn't spoken, and then we'll let folks who've spoken come back.
So I'm going to put out another proposal, and I'm doing it because my emphasis or my priority is on keeping as many staff in schools as possible, and potentially not cutting any restart money to begin with, because we know the value of that. And I agree with Mr. Swanson, I'm not in favor, and with Ms. Gordon, I think she was going there, in cutting the coordinating teachers, thank you, role. I looked at our history of supplement raises. And if you take the potential savings from HVAC, you take the community dollars, and you eliminate the supplement, you come up with $7.1 million. And I know some people are going to say, how can you not pay teachers? But I kind of view it as we are having to fire people also to give a small raise with the supplement. And if you did that and you repurposed that 7.1 million, you would keep dental, you would keep M&O, you would keep restart. If we're not worried about the counselors, because those are vacant positions, that would leave 2.4 million for additional staff to be kept at Title I schools. I know we hear about staff, like some schools may be losing multiple front office staff members, prioritizing our schools where it really hurts. You know, I've heard of we all hear about the good things about Restart. That's why I included it there as well, to keep it at 6 million versus going to 5 million. You could also look at, with that additional money, any supplies we're cutting. And again, I'm doing this thinking about staff and retaining staff. I would like to do it all, but we're put in a position not be able to do it all. And so it's okay if everyone thinks that's a terrible idea, but that's what I was putting forward today, to try to keep staff and keep as much in the schools as we can. And maybe the state will do their job and give an appropriate raise so it offsets that.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. Sure. Ms. Rice, did you have anything you want to say at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just being patient. Absolutely. Thank you all for this hard work and dedication that you did with giving us options. So I don't have a lot to say, just to reiterate my colleagues. One, I'm in complete opposition of the 15 positions. I'm in complete opposition of touching any restart money because we can increase student academics, which is what we're all here for, when you're touching students who need the support the most and the teachers who need the support the most. Again, touching the 15 positions directly impacts learning?
Excuse me, Ms. Rice, if you want to just wait for a second so you can,
I guess so.
I apologize to you.
I'm not gonna let him live that one down.
Yeah. All right.
All right, if we can get Ms. Rice your attention.
Look, reclaiming time. Okay.
Needed that comedic break.
We did that for a moment. This is some heavy stuff.
Yeah, but yours for that, I'll be right
All right, Miss Oaks, he playing music, he walking out. Yes, so great. Laughter is great medicine, right? Let's switch to wellness. Great medicine for this heavy dosage of stuff that we're taking right now. So listen, I completely agree with colleagues with that. I know that you all have worked very hard to create these options, but the option of teacher repositioning and the option of restart funding, I'll do some strong advocacy of no for that. We can figure out some of the ways, the last two that we talked about with maintenance and operations, those options. But yeah, I don't think I need to belabor the point. I think everyone has made great arguments. I completely agree with what we said, but I'm not, and I can count. And I already said I had 3. No to restart positions and no to coordinating positions. It's a no. Really, no.
Ms. Mahaffey and then Ms.
Way over
Gordon.
here hiding in the, yeah, none of these options are good options. And I think we all recognize and realize that. And, I think in many of these budgets, if not every budget season, we hear from Mr. Nieder, from the superintendent. We share when we adopt our budget that so much of our budget is tied to people. I have to say, I don't particularly like Mr. Hershey's option, but I also am interested in Mr. Hershey's option because I think it preserves what we have. But again, I don't like any of these options. And so I don't want to throw it out, but I'd like to see it fleshed out more. I know we have one more of these. We have a public hearing tomorrow. I'm sure there are folks at our board work session tonight, but I do think making sure that we can maintain our buildings, making sure that we can continue to cover the employment piece for the dental benefit is critical. And so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Ms. Gordon.
Yes, to Ms. Mahaffey's point, like to follow up to Ms. Mahaffey's point and to follow up to Mr. Hershey's point. I think it's important for us to recognize that every time that we hear from staff, every time that we hear from educators, those who are in the building, we are never hearing that they want to raise. That I know the conversations that we've had with librarians, the conversations that we've had with people that come out to these public input sessions, though they are due more compensation, that is not something that they raise. And so I think to Mr. Hershey's point, it's important, I think we have all made it clear that it is important for us to make sure that we are preserving those that are in those buildings every day, working with students, counselors, coordinating teachers, digital learning coordinators, those things that closely impact students are non-negotiables. I know for me. I know as a classroom teacher, someone who poured my all into my job and still was not compensated enough and still had issues paying rent, paying car notes, paying daycare. There is something to be said about these educators who are coming to the table, not asking for a raise, but asking us to preserve their actual positions. So to that, I would entertain discussion around Mr. Hershey's proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Vice Chair Swanson.
So I think I'm concerned, and I appreciate Mr. Hershey for, finding ways to add and subtract things as needed, because that is the goal. I tried to find one that was a little less of a pause, because I do think once we start talking about getting rid of local compensation, we're not able to recruit and retain. We know the state has to do their job by paying teachers. We have seen that at the local level, we have stepped up. I think that has been an expectation. So I'm concerned that if that option is taken away, that we cannot be the district that is able to recruit and retain. The second largest district passed their budget that included local increases in our local supplemental pay. I think our neighbor districts are doing the same. So that one gives me, I can't fully commit to that. I think, again, the energy has to be put on 16 West Jones Street, where those folks are making decisions every day. Some who have not stepped in the classroom, some who do not know what it takes to do the work that we do. And I think those are the folks that we have to rely on. And so I just wanted to appreciate Mr. Hershey's work, but that one gives me a lot of pause.
Mr. Hershey, before we go back to you, Ms. Crawford, before we go to you, I want to get a little more discussion on this point. Sorry, Mr. Nader, if you could, just briefly, could you explain again how the supplement works in terms of who gets it, who doesn't get it, how it's applied, and if there are, pros or cons that we could see from looking there for money to save some of these other programs?
Sure. Yeah. And Wake County's public schools is not unique in the state in providing what is considered to be a local salary supplement. But the state, and I can pull up a current year document. The state currently has a state base, different categories of teachers, those with just a bachelor's degree and no other certifications, those with a master's degree. You could have either one of those with national boards, and there's some other things as well. We also have separate schedules for special needs teachers. But the state pays so much per year, so much per month, and then we as a county, to attract teachers, pay an additional amount per month that adds up to a year. That becomes their total salary. When the state legislates an increase for teachers and a step increase, it's for the state piece of it, the state schedule piece of it, and not the local supplement. So if over time, and the local supplement is a fixed dollar amount, if over time the board's desirous of keeping a teacher's total wages, kind of moving total wages up, that any percent or amount increase in the state component would need to be matched by a component in the local supplement. If there were, and what's included in the proposed budget was a 3% supplement increase based upon an estimated 3% average increase in the state salary schedule for teachers. So, could the board decide to not increase it 3% and increase it 2%, 1%, no percent? Yes, that still, and whatever the state legislates would still be available. And one thing I would share with the board is if the board is not desirous of going down the path of moving coordinating teachers or finding alternate funding sources. That was about a $1.8 million option. Each of those 3% in the proposed salary supplement increase for teacher. I take 5.6, divide it in 3, I think is about $1.8 million.
Mr. Hirsch?
So a couple of things. One, if the state comes in under 3%, because we set aside that we're targeting that for salary too, it would be a disappointment. How much would that change our outlay in salary? And let me say that I'm asking this, and I also want to say, if the state covers master's pay or anything else, and we end up with additional funds, the first thing, if we did not do a supplement, when we had to adopt the budget fully, would be to add in money for supplement to cover it. So it's not, I wouldn't, please don't use desirous around not doing this, because that we all want to do it. But to my question, if they come in under 3%, what does that do to our budget?
It's a great question, and actually we had robust conversation about that yesterday. As the state works through different iterations of its budget as it relates to compensation, it can impact the proposed budget before you as a board. I'm going to be overly simplistic in one of a couple manners. It can require additional local funding, or it might require less local funding. The Senate's budget proposal, we haven't run the actual numbers, but the Senate's budget proposal would likely require less local funding than what is currently in the proposed budget before the board. That being said, to make any decisions at this point about changes to the proposed budget based upon that, we believe is very premature, because it's going to be changing. The House is going to come out with its proposal. They're going to be going back and forth. And almost to your point, Mr. Hershey, it's kind of a wait-and-see game right now, and the board still has the opportunity on the other side of that wait-and-see game to make final decisions about its recommended salary schedules. That's on the other side of a final state budget.
And that's where I was going to go. So if they came in under 3% and we had otherwise covered what we wanted to, we would have additional funds where we could put that towards the local supplement.
That is a reasonable scenario, yes.
That's kind of where I'm going with all of this. So
Sometimes you can see a lower percent, and it seems like, oh, it would not cost as much. But the Senate budget also has in it a lower percent raise, but also a bonus. And in some cases, that bonus plus that percent is a higher percent than what's in the superintendent's proposed budget for some of our staff. So you have to look at the totality.
Right, and that requires a detailed analysis. And at this point, to run that analysis would be beyond a rhetorical exercise, because it's going to change.
Right.
And so if I can just quickly get you to clarify that. So like with the Senate budget, they have they're not less than 3, it's like a
6 or 1.7.
Yeah, they've presented it different ways, but they do have a special raise for teachers, but then they specify a different rate for other school-based employees, right? In our budget, we were looking to apply the same percentage across the board to all employees.
Is our estimate of what they might do. But
Yes.
we know that.
But ours was universal at that same rate. It wasn't differentiated.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. So further questions? I saw Ms. Caulfield, and then anyone over here. Did you still have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess it's, I have two, kind of questions, but it's really more of a concern. We have some options for the dental, and I appreciate that we were trying to come up with other ways to save for that. But as I'm looking at it, it's cutting money from Restart, coordinating teachers, building maintenance that directly affects our buildings where our students are, cutting building subs, supplies. It's all stuff that is educational needs in the classroom. So I would really like some other options that are not actually removing from it. I don't think that it's just not a good idea. I think it's kind of really a bad idea to be cutting those things that directly affect the classroom, because it's taking away from our teachers and our students. We're also having retention issues. So I think it makes it harder on the teachers when we have all of these cuts and we're taking away all these things from the classroom when they're already strained. So I'd love to see more options that are not directly in the classroom. And if you could just repeat what your suggestion was.
It was using the community fund. I'm just, because that was new to that. The potential for the HVAC, though, Ms. Mahavi's concerns about the heat is certainly justified. And then eliminating the supplement for now and then revisiting that upon the numbers from the state when we have to adopt the official budget.
Okay.
And so that would generate 7.1 million in repurposed funds to keep what you were talking about.
Right.
As much as I don't like the idea as well, it's trying to keep staff in schools.
I do appreciate that. I just wonder what the teachers would feel if we tax them.
I'm sure, but it's
I know.
to keep.
We'll find out once the.
Yeah. But it would keep the dental, which would be worth more than the supplement.
Do you have more, Ms. Caulfield?
No, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Gordon, did you have a follow-up or a question?
Yeah, I actually had a follow-up to Ms. Caulfield's point. You know, during our very first budget meeting, I sat and I really went through and I wrote down all of the direct student impact positions that is being proposed to be cut. And I just want to make sure that I'm accurate on my information. So in academic advancement, we are proposing to cut 10 positions. 5 positions are nursing positions. In schools, we are proposing to cut building subs altogether, 9 high school positions, assistant principal positions. We're also, on top of positions, we're also proposing to cut instructional supplies. We are proposing to cut 20 counselor and social worker positions, in addition to the digital learning, 10 digital learning positions, and now 15 coordinating teacher positions. Is it accurate in saying that we are making more cuts where the impact is where the impact directly affects students versus those that do not?
So I would say it depends. And so to say that it's not an impact on schools, that wouldn't be an honest answer. But if I say that we've got 160 coordinating teachers, and we eliminate 15, hopefully a lot of those positions are vacant, I don't think that would be the impact. Well, I know that wouldn't be the impact that we would expect. If we have nearly 400 counselor positions, and we are trying to identify 200 vacant months between counselors, social workers, and I think school psychologists, which they are hard to find. I would argue that reducing by those numbers will not have the impact of changing the services that we have in the school. And so while I absolutely understand the impact that any of these cuts will have on services that are directly received by schools, I also recognize that this is an opportunity for us to better focus how we provide any of those services. As I always say, to identify how you make those reductions, part of what we recognize is that much of the resources are spent on staff. And so the idea is, how do we minimize what that impact is? And so these obviously are not easy recommendations for me as an educator because I do know the impact, but I also know that the primary responsibility that we all have is to make sure that the budget is balanced. And in many instances, it will require that you look at personnel. One of the things I'm always committed to is how can we be more efficient at what we already have. I know one of the big things that we have to recognize as a district is the difference, and people have heard me say this, the difference between extra and excess. And so we always want to be able to have extra. But if we can identify where there's excess, where there's redundancy, where there's duplication, even in our services that are provided to schools, that's when we have to take a look. And this might be the opportunity to do some of that reset. But I understand every impact that you're talking about, and that is a difficult part of this choice. So, yeah.
Now, I want to respond to that as well, because I think we all want to do what's best for what goes on in the classroom. But at the same time, I think we have to be very aware that to operate a school district and to provide the resources for the staff in the classroom requires a certain level of management and administration. And if you look at the materials that have been provided and in the budget book and some of these staff answers, you will see that in Wake County, we are doing that very lean, especially when compared to other school districts around the state and around the country. If you look here at, this was the answer provided in number 10, the months of employment, how many months are assigned directly to schools? How many months are budgeted centrally but working in schools? 94% of all of our salaried dollars, salary and wage dollars, are going into the schools, with central services having only 6%. If we don't touch positions that are assigned directly in the schools or assigned centrally but working in the schools, we will not find the dollars that we need. And at some point, as we've talked about, we need central services staff. We have had meeting after meeting where we talk about a service we want to provide, but we're unable to provide it or provide it as efficiently as we want because we don't have the service that we need. You've heard me talk about several times, how we have like one plumber per 50 schools, and you compare that to other districts. We've seen here with the technology staff we have at central office compared to other school districts. The ratio that we have is far leaner than other districts in the districts, other metro markets where we compete. We talk about providing greater efficiencies for IT. Well, we need an IT staff to do that. We talk about being able to perform these audits and have transparency. We need a budget and a finance staff to do that. So we'll never win the argument between the popularity and the importance of putting resources in the classroom versus a cold central office, right? But the reality is there's a certain level of support we have to maintain. And it's my belief that for many years, we have been shorting ourselves in that area. If you look at the growth of the district, we've added, as you saw the numbers, almost 50% more schools in 10 years, but the staff only grew about 30% to support that. About a 40% increase in the number of students we serve. And again, with fewer staff, that ratio declining. We have more. We've added people, but now those people are supporting more schools and more students than they have traditionally. So, I don't see that we can just say we should just go to central office and take out those positions. Where we don't have HR support, it affects us in our hiring and our ability to fill vacancies. Where we don't have maintenance and operations support, it affects us in our ability to address all of these problems that families, students, and staff have talked about in our schools. So, I will say, as Dr. Taylor said, there are no good cuts to make, but, if I have a decision to make between retaining building subs, who I championed and I thought was a wonderful innovation coming out of the pandemic, and I see have a very positive impact on our schools, or finding a way to fund maintenance and operations staff to keep our schools open so they're not closed because the HVAC's not working, the air conditioning's not working, there's flood or there's mold issues, I'm going to choose to keep the whole school open and education continuing. So, there are positions that all of these positions have value, but, we have to prioritize. They're not easy cuts to make. And I think you've all brought cuts that I think we need to revisit and find other ways to support. And I appreciate everyone who's brought different proposals for how we can avoid those cuts, how we can preserve the benefits for our students, for our staff. And so I'm interested to see how we do that. But if no one else will do it, I'm going to defend the money that we invest on our staff at central office. And I will compare our efficiency here up against any other school district. So not to say there's not cuts that can be made or individual things we can identify, improvements we can make, but I just worry about blanket statements about we should just take from central office without reviewing things individually. And Ms. Gordon, please.
Can I have a follow-up to that? I in no way said or mentioned anything about central services, but what I am saying is that in the same spirit of making sure that we are keeping things a priority, what I am saying is of the main priority should, in my opinion, be the staff that work in the school buildings every day with our kids, with our students. I in no way mentioned central services or that there needs to be these outrageous cuts to central services, but I do believe in the same way that we're talking about the efficiency of our staff in our buildings. For example, when we're looking at vacancies, are we doing that across the board? And in addition to question number 19, where it says, for comparison, can you provide data on how the central office function has grown over the past 20 years? I can't. I guess I keep looking at this question and I'm like, I need more. Maybe it's that I don't understand it. But I think my message is very clear about the student impact positions should be a priority. That is my message. That's my overall message.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey, and then Ms. Rice.
Ms. Rice first.
Ms. Rice, would you like to?
Thank you so much, Mr. Hershey. I'm in the same vein as Ms. Gordon, as I was taking notes and then she came right back and hit it because I was going to say the same thing. I didn't hear her say anything about central off time. To go back to our home rules, our home rules of budgeting. As I said last budget year, I'm saying this budget year, there are certain things we do not touch. There are certain things we pay in our home budgets that are non-negotiables. We pay our mortgage, we pay our utilities. Those are non-negotiables no matter what is going on. Anything that directly impacts students, which are these positions, is a non-negotiable, which means we have to find it somewhere else where it hurts. So the same spirit in which we say all the beautiful things that you said, that I agree with to an extent, I just offer a different perspective. I get it, but just want to offer a different perspective. We know that those things are important too, but the same spirit in which we can say it's hard, it's tough, but we have to, then I propose the same thing and say it's hard, it's tough, but we have to find it somewhere else. And if we have to go through, like I've been doing now, and looking at certain things that we have cut that are directly impacting families and students, even things as simple as the money that's coming out of the child care piece. If parents can't get their children to school, we have a situation in my district right now. You're talking about impacting student learning. Well, what happens when you don't have those people in there, that's teachers to help, and students don't have anywhere to go so parents can go to work? Like really right now, I have a school whose absenteeism is so profound because parents have to go to work and don't have anywhere for the children to go so that they can actually go to school, so therefore they stay home. Therefore, our achievement rates will continue to be minimized and not increase when we directly take away things and even think about, the fact that we even think about touching restart money, the fact that we even think about touching positions should be like, it's like a no, because that's a bill that has to be paid. It's like, where do we touch other places that we know may have a direct effect, that we know may not be able to, it'll be a very minimal, shoestring budget in that space. We have to look at that. We cannot ever think that going to our teachers and direct functions of a classroom is a possibility. And that's a different perspective that I'm sharing. I'm not saying your perspective is wrong, but I am sharing, and I stand in solidarity with every word that Ms. Gordon said, is that as we list it, and I've been looking at the same thing over time, everything we're doing is directly, we're pulling, if you go through and comb and look through everywhere we've decreased and then we've increased in areas that doesn't directly impact, everything we do in the system impacts learning. We get that. But some things we need to look at that's not literally in the classroom. And while my central office staff is extremely important, I believe that our central office staff, as another perspective, what we can look at, since you brought up central office staff, we can look at how we are being most efficient with the staff, trying to service 200, now going to be 200 plus schools, 160 something students, and what that looks like. I think that we do some things in a more communications audit type of thing, we might see a more efficiently run central office with the money that we already have within it, that it doesn't have to be increased or even decreased, but using what we have, but using some more audits and in communication styles. What are we doing? How are we actually communicating from central office to schools and that type of thing, so that we can see a better efficiency. But that's where I just want to leave it there too. Of that, I think I hear it, I understand it, but I strongly believe we keep touching bills that we're not supposed to touch.
And thank you, Ms. Ress and Ms. Gordon, and I appreciate that. And for clarification, if you did not say central services and I misheard it, I apologize for that. But please understand, my interpretation is that by implication, if you look at what the schools fund and you say we're not going to touch things that directly touch students in the classroom, and all of that is off the table, what else is there other than central service? So if I misunderstood and there's other areas to target or address, or things that I should refocus to, please let me know. And again, if I misunderstood, but to me, the implication was, especially like 94% of the budget being in the schools, 6% central office. If we didn't touch the 94%, that we were then being directed to look at the 6%. Okay, Mr. Hershey and then Ms. Caulfield.
So I had sent you the email, and I think this is why we need it so desperately. And technically as a board, we voted to approve this 10
months ago, yeah.
We need the organizational study. And it's for this conversation it's for the public, it's for our school staff. Because we hear, they say it too, hey, just don't cut here, cut central services. And it's a big unknown. And by getting the independent one done, I know it's a cost, and we're trying to cut, but it's crucial. And we would not even be having, we just need it. And I stand by the vote, and I don't know how the mechanics of we voted on it, where is it kind of thing, and I don't want to go way down that road, but we need it. So when are we getting this?
So what we can do is go back to that RFP because it was issued, and if the board wants us to revisit that, then we absolutely will. And I agree that it is good to be able to show in very real terms to our public what our staffing looks like, so they can understand that. I'll just give you an example because that's one of the things that I do when I go around the district and I talk to staff, and I get a full understanding of where we are. And so one of the early clear examples to me was when I was talking with the staff in maintenance and operations, and they shared with me that we get over 300,000 work orders a year. And that's about right for a district this size, 200 schools, blah, blah, blah. But she also shared that the staff hasn't changed. I want to say she said in 25 years. She had been in that department 25 years. So you can imagine 2005 she was here and we had 130 some schools, but now that's increased. And so the study will absolutely show that where we are with other districts. Now we already have information on how much we've grown as a district internally, both at central services and in the schools. And so that information we already have, but I think people do need to see the comparison with where we are with other districts as well, and they will absolutely see that there's a difference. And I'll just, reaffirm again that none of these things are easy. But when we know that 87% of the resources are in schools, then that is where the difficulty in the work comes in. And so I think our biggest purpose now is to refocus and reorganize and re-examine how we use the resources. I think that's very important. Even if that is school resources, there's nothing that says we can't be more efficient in those resources as well as the resources that we have here at Central Services. So I think it's a dual thing that we have to do. And this year has been about looking at Central Services for the 25-26 budget year and then doing the same work for the 26-27 school year as it relates to schools. And as Kim's and others talked about, I specifically want school staff principals to be a part of this because they can speak very clearly about what happens in their schools. And a lot of what we've looked at, a lot of that has been based on conversations that we've had with principals. And so, they understand it. But we're reviewing.
Thank you, Ms. Coffey.
So I think what Ms. Gordon and I kept repeating the same thing, like the classroom effect. But I think we have the question number 19 that was answered. We went from $800 million in 20 years to $2.1 billion. That's a huge difference. But we grew by 65 new schools and almost 46,000 new students. So I think for us sitting here talking about the budget, to say that we'll cut the restart, the teacher supplements, even as an option, coordinating teachers, and we talked about all of them. To say that we can do that, and I'm going to quote Ms. Johnson-Hostler, how she always said both and end, right? I don't see why it is a problem to say if we're willing to cut all of this out of the classroom where it's going to affect our teachers and our students directly, why couldn't we explore all those options? So I don't think that speaking about central office is really problematic. I mean, we're talking about all of our dollars. We're talking, if you can take teachers and things out of the classroom, why couldn't we talk about how many part-time roles do we have? Could we combine them and possibly pay them a little bit differently and, therefore we save some money doing that? I mean, there's all kinds of options that could be thrown out, and yes, it is in central office. It doesn't mean go in and annihilate everybody. That's not what I don't think anybody here is asking for that. All of this is uncomfortable, but to say that we're willing to risk all of that at the classroom but not look at some of the other options, I think is just...
No, for point of clarity, there's cuts to both in the budget.
Well, we were cutting vacant positions, which, as Mr. Nieder said, is really not spending. It's just, it's not savings, we're just not spending, which we weren't before.
Mr. Nieder, then
Well,
Ms. Rice?
To a point, that is correct, but that was a limited component. I want to, if you look at number 8 again, the reductions in budgets coming out of central office in the proposed budget in our repurposing represent 38%. Relative to the fact that it's only 6% of the total budget. There are cuts in the budget, significant cuts, and as a percentage, significantly higher than anything, and I hate to use the word recommended, but included within the proposed budget. We again have tried to mitigate the impact on the schools in what is in the superintendent's proposed budget, and the numbers are clearly.
And so,
I just want to reiterate that it's not really so much about the salary as it is understanding the roles and how we can kind of condense and figure out what it is that we can do. And it's not just there. I mean, I'm sure there's other things that we can look at. I know that you've been looking at it endlessly. I'm just, to only have these big ticket items are coming out of our classroom, and it's problematic to say, sure, we're going to look at that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead and let Dr. Taylor, because
No,
I think it's in line with what he's trying to do.
And ultimately, when we look at the cuts, I think and I'm glad that Mr. Needy brought that out, because I wanted to mention that as well, that one of the things I committed to was making sure that everybody knew the involvement that central services had in these cuts, because I know there's always going to a question is going to come up, but what did you all cut? And so when we think about being 6% of the budget, being 38% of the cut, that is one thing that administrators here at the central services has done, is to look at their departments and identify where they can make reductions. And I can tell you that that work will not end. We will have to continue to look at where there are things that we need to discontinue, what we call it strategic abandonment, but at the same time, determine how do we increase the support that we have to schools. So what I do know is that we will be looking at where we use technology, where we reduce staff, where there are vacancies, blah, blah, blah. That absolutely has to happen. But also, what is it that's going to be needed to support the 15th largest district in the country? So that means if we look at human resources, there is no way that we can continue to do this work without expanding what's in that department. And that's central services. That's the clockwork behind the wall that most people don't see. But if I look at another large district in this state, they have a lot more resources. We have way more students and employees. And so that work will always continue. But I did want everybody to know that we were absolutely a part of this cut. And that the worst thing that we can do is make these recommendations and not be able to see where the central services was a part of it. But we get you.
We also made an effort not to adjust any formulas in the classroom. So there are no adjustments to teacher formulas, there's no adjustment to instructional assistant formulas. So purely in the classroom, there haven't been any adjustments that impact those ratios of adults to children.
Ms. Rice.
Thank you. While I value, well, I think it's valuable to look at other districts and actually what they're doing in comparison. I really do believe, as well as Wake County, as you mentioned, we're the 15th largest in the district. I think that it's also time in a place where we need to learn how to lead too, right? I hear a lot of times when we share things that we want to say and we hear leadership say, in comparison to. I think that it is great that we compare ourselves to what is about us, but I think Wake County is in a valuable space because of the resources we do hold in this community and in this space. I think that it's a great time that we look at our talent. We have the talent, we have the vision, and we have an opportunity to set a standard rather than follow it. I think that we really need to recognize who we are as a district and how we function in the nation, right? So I think some things are good. Look at how well we fare in our magnet programs, right? Look at how well we do, 35 opportunities, but Wake County brought home, 13 of the, seriously. I think it's really time for us to stop looking at what everybody else is doing, and we need to lead and show, and then we become the model and the example. I think that we need to stop looking at taking consideration to what they've done, look at our own needs of where we are as a county and as a district, and then tweak it for us and lead. We have brilliant minds and educational and people in this room just alone who have some better answers, but maybe sometimes don't have an opportunity to share those answers with leadership who are making these decisions. There are people even within our departments, so how much time are we taking to really speak to the people that's in our departments to say, what do you guys think? Or are we just only in those huddles of letting the particular ones we think that know the answer that's not necessarily doing the day-to-day? How often within our district are we scaling things to take the opportunity to ask the people who do the work every day, what do you think? Versus we sitting around the table making the decision, what is going to hurt the most? What can we tweak? You probably will find that it was in the trenches of our people would say, really and truthfully, we could cut that, we can cut that. We do need a little bit more of this, but we can cut that. And next thing you know, you might have cuts that you hadn't even thought about because you're here and they're here doing the work. And so I think that we should relook at what we see everyone else doing, and I think Wake should take a great opportunity and let us lead for a change so that people will say in their boardrooms, well, here's what Wake County is doing. This is what they did that was a little different. And so I think that we should take opportunities to find what that is, but you'll never find it if we don't dig deeper and ask the brilliant minds that are among us. I'm not saying we don't do it. I think that we can do it a little bit more efficiently and effectively with the talent that we have already within our staff.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Swanson.
Thank you. And I just want to say to Ms. Kimsey and Mr. Nieder and Superintendent Taylor, thank you all for presenting these options. You all listened to what we requested, which was dental and HVAC. Those two items are back, which we also knew there was going to have to be additional cuts. And I also understand, which was told to us years ago, a couple of cycles ago, this was going to be a tough budget. We knew that when we passed 24-25. We knew 25-26 was going to be tough when we passed 22-23. So I don't think this is new to anyone. I also know the work that goes into this. And if anyone at home has a 2.3 operating budget, we need to call them and figure out what donation they can give. But since they don't, we have to make the tough conversations and to do this because this is our job as board members. Hire the superintendent, pass a budget. Those are the two pieces that we have. And so I do think we have 2 more meetings and we have to pass a budget. I understand and I hope that the General Assembly will do better because, again, we are filling in the gap when the General Assembly should be doing their job, which is constitutionally their constitutional piece. So I think there are some recaps that we can do, some next steps. But, again, we have the 29 committee meeting and then the May 6th work session to meet that May 15th deadline. And I'll keep the rest of my comments to myself.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanson. So, Mr. Nieder, Ms. Kinsey, and then Vice Chair and Budget Chair Swanson will need to come up with a timeline for how to proceed.
Yes, and Chair Haggerty, if I could, this is the last slide in the deck. Good segue. Again, if board members have additional questions, you can submit them to Ms. Kinsey, keeping in mind we don't have a 2-week gap between now and your next discussion. It's a 1-week gap, but we've got to have board materials done by the end of Thursday. I'd like to say we can still give you till Tuesday. Wait, today is Tuesday. Right. Tomorrow for any additional questions, but that's a real narrow window then to get any significant number of questions researched and reply to. You do have, as was earlier mentioned, the third in your regional public hearings, and that is, my understanding, tomorrow at 6:15 p.m. at the Southeast Raleigh YMCA location. You'll meet, as you just described, at your 29th work session. Ideally, at the 29th work session, which is taking place during the Finance Committee meeting, the board will arrive at consensus over any changes to the superintendent's proposed budget, and we'll bring that back to the board on May 6th for the board to approve its proposed budget for the 2025-26 year. If, for whatever reason, the board is not able to reach consensus next Tuesday on April 29th, as Mr. Swanson pointed out, you will have the opportunity for another work session on May 6th prior to your board meeting, but we would still ask at your May 6th board meeting that you approve your proposed budget, because if you are not in a position to do that, you will be required, ultimately based upon state statute, to have a specially called board meeting to approve a proposed budget such that we can get that to the county by the required May 15th date.
All right, is everyone clear on those deadlines? Okay. Before we break the work session, I do want to go back through a couple things that we talked about and just sort of take the temperature in the room. So the staff recommendation that came back did have a restoration of the dental benefit. Can I just see informal show of hands? If you're not ready to come in, give me a side signal, but how many people are in favor of restoring that benefit? Okay. We also had $600,000 for the maintenance and operation contracting. That wasn't all of the maintenance and operations contracting, but it was what they identified in there. And all those in favor of restoring that in the budget?
So adding it back into the
Yeah.
budget, you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, the reaction I got to the proposed cut concerning the coordinating teachers, I think had less support, but I just want to take the temperature. Going around the room, those in favor of that recommendation for the 1.8? All right, doesn't look like that one's going to fly. All right. And then there were two other ideas that were offered for savings. The building temperatures with some caveat, perhaps for some special situations in individual buildings. That could save about $500,000. Are we good with that? And then allocating some of the increased revenues coming from community use. That was about $1 million that we could put back in. Is that okay? So we have a gap to fill, but it's a narrower gap. And I think this is something that we can do in the timeline that's been put to us. Yes, ma'am.
How much is needed for the positions? I need to know that number so we can find.
So let's go. We've heard a couple different proposals on different ones. Mr. Hershey, you had some specific ones that you had proposed. And I'm not saying that this is the plan, but could you share the numbers that you had?
Well, I had talked about, I really wanted to leave the other jobs kind of up to staff to evaluate, front office staff, people with, I didn't come up with specific.
Yeah.
But I had come up with putting the $1 million back in Restart, and then that would leave about $2.4 million in other jobs to claw back. And that's if people want to go back to the $6 million for Restart or not. I'm open to that. It's just repurposing that amount in a way that pulls staff back in, but I don't have specifics.
And you would balance that with the supplement?
Yep.
Right, okay.
Can I hear, just for clarity for me, please, could I hear the number that we need to reach? The number, and so we're saying 1.8 million is what, if we were to move the 15 coordinators, that is what we have to replace, correct? Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure.
There was a little bit of buffer, so if you restore the dental, which is 2.5 million, restore the 600,000 for M&O, that's 3.1 million. Tell me if I'm wrong. Then if we,
A couple hundred thousand.
then the 1% change in the degrees helps with that 0.5 million. Community schools, 1 million, so I'm seeing a $1.6 million gap. If
we had
those
no
things were
other
agreed
jobs.
upon, a $1.6 million gap.
Follow up from Ms. Rice and then Ms. Gordon and then Vice Chair Swanson.
No,
Yeah.
that's all I needed. I just needed to know
Okay.
the number that we needed to find.
And anything that you could go back through your notes
Yes.
and you don't hear it, get that to Mr. Nader and Ms. Kimsey, and then they can provide it to everybody in case anyone has the same question.
Okay.
And that way we'll all have it as soon as possible. Ms. Gordon?
I know we were trying to find the 1.8 million for the coverage for dental, but going back.
2.5.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2.5. I apologize. But going back, are we also, is our digital learning coordinator still on the table? Where's that?
They are in the
So
superintendent's.
anything is on the table and can be brought for discussion.
Okay.
We didn't really talk a lot about that today, so I didn't really get a sense that we had a majority for or against
Okay.
that any position. Mr. Swanson?
Right,
Mr.
I
Swanson?
think there's a lot of consensus about the 1.8 to get us to keep the digital learning positions, not the digital learning, the coordinating teachers. I had a proposal which was adjusting the 5 million. It was 5 million to 4 or 4 to 5. I can't remember. I think it was 5 million for the Restart and $5 for the supplies, which also equaled 1.8 as a way of we're trying to find something, adding something to find something to visit.
It got you to the same number?
Correct.
Okay. And so, Mr. Nieder, Ms. Kimsey, I know you've been taking notes through the whole conversation, so there could be other areas that we've missed, other things that we've talked about. I'd like you, if you could, capture different scenarios that were offered by board members, and then put that together, and then we'll get that prepared to send out to the board as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay? All right. Do you have any final thoughts,
Yeah, I just
Superintendent Taylor?
want to get one clarity. I know Mr. Hershey said 7.1 million with 3% on the supplement.
And the community and the 1 degree.
Okay, what does 3% represent? Is it
I think
7?
3% was 5.6 million for the supplement. And then the 1 million for community use would be 6.6 million. And then I think the dollars for the HVAC is another 500.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Taylor. Shoot, I thought we were going to have time to do some closed session. But I think we should all just get a little break and maybe get a little bite to eat.
Yes.
All right, so if that's the case, what we'll do is we'll close the work session and we'll reconvene at 5:30 in the boardroom. Please be on time because we've got a lot of stuff we got to do in closed session tonight. All right? All right, thank you.